After a difficult breakup, I, a 40-year-old in tech, found myself feeling incredibly lonely. I am not exactly known for my charisma, and the end of a 5-year relationship left me in a very low place. That's when I turned to Tinder, seeking a temporary escape from the idea of serious relationships. One day, I connected with Darla. She was 35, with kind red hair, a warm smile, and a slightly quirky demeanor that made me feel seen. She mentioned living in an old farmhouse on the outskirts of town, where she cared for her paralyzed grandfather. Darla was funny, honest, and seemed genuinely interested in me. After a couple of casual dates, she invited me to her place. She offered to cook a homemade meal and explained that she preferred not to leave her grandpa alone at night. I hesitated, feeling things were moving quickly, but my craving for connection won out, and I agreed. The farmhouse was deep in the woods, old yet cozy, exuding a rustic charm. She greeted me with a kiss and a warm smile, then showed me around. The living room was filled with antiques. The kitchen, however, had a distinct smell of herbs and raw meat. She said she was making stew, her grandfather's favorite. That's when I first noticed something odd. Large chunks of raw meat sitting out on the counter. No fridge, no ice. I asked if she was going to put them away. Nah, the doctor authorized it that way. Grandpa's on a full meat diet. You know, as night came, the farmhouse grew eerily quiet. We sat on the couch and talked, but my eyes kept drifting to the hallway, to Grandpa's door. She said he was paralyzed, couldn't speak, and hadn't left his bed in years. But I never once heard him. No creaks, no coughs, nothing. At around 11, she got up saying she needed to change her grandpa into sleeping clothes and give him his medicines. After she left, I started to feel bored, so I wandered around the house. I walked over to the basement door. Out of curiosity, I opened the door, and a wave of reeking odor hit me in the face. It smelled like something died down there. I grabbed my phone for light and started down the wooden stairs. As I descended, my knees started trembling. There were jars, dozens of it filled with what looked like human parts, fingers, eyeballs, and pieces of flesh floating in cloudy red fluid. There were crates stacked with bones. Some still had blood and skin on them, and hanging from the ceiling on rusted meat hooks were human torsos cut, open ribs exposed. One still had a wedding ring on, and I threw up right there. What the hell? Suddenly I heard a sound upstairs. The bathroom door swung shut. I rushed up the stairs, locked the basement door again, and returned to the couch just in time.
Darla smiled at me. Everything okay? I forced a grin. Yeah, just stretching my legs. My brain was screaming. I needed to get out, fast, but I noticed a deadbolt on the front door, and there was no key in sight. I didn't want to read suspicion, so I told her I was worn out and asked if I could lie down. She agreed and let me down the hallway right past her grandfather's room.
The open door revealed a small window near the bed, just large enough for an escape. She directed me to the guest room across the hall, promising blankets and instructing me to make myself at home. The moment she left, I tiptoed into what I assumed was Grandpa's room. It was completely dark. I used my phone again, with low brightness, to see. He was in bed, his face obscured by a hospital-like curtain. Beneath the bed, I saw stacked plates, covered in buzzing flies. My blood ran cold at the thought of being in the same room as a cannibal, and I kept my eyes fixed on him as I moved towards the window. The window was old and stiff, but I managed to slide it open inch by inch, making minimal noise. I was almost done when I heard slow, raspy breathing from the bed. I froze, looking back. Without warning, his head snapped to the side, like a doll's, and his eyes opened wide. I swear, On my life. He smiled. It wasn't a soft smile, but a grotesque, crooked grin that stretched too far, revealing sharp, filthy teeth that seemed to have grown beyond normal. Panicked, I scrambled out the window, scraping my arm on the way down. I didn't dare look back, running through the woods until I reached the main road. From there, I hitchhiked to a gas station and called the police. They went back to the house that night. Here's the part I still don't understand. When they got there, the house was empty. Darla, Grandpa, and the horror in that basement were all gone. They said the place hadn't been lived in for years. They showed me property records. The last listed owner was a man named Roy Miller, a butcher. He had been paralyzed after a farm accident in the late 90s. He died in 2003. And Darla, there was no record of anyone with that name connected to the property. No license, no social, nothing. I check the news every week for stories about missing men, and I can't use dating apps anymore. But sometimes at night I'll dream about that house, and in the dream, I'm back in that room staring into those wide dead eyes of that old cannibal as the broken grin slowly stretches across his face. This happened about 4 months ago, and even now, I still double-check every window before going to bed. It started with a Tinder match. His name was Liam. He was a photographer, the artsy kind. His profile was filled with striking black and white portraits, mostly people, but the way he captured emotion in their eyes, it was impressive. He was a smooth talker, and our conversations were engaging. It wasn't pushy, like some of the other guys I'd met on Tinder before. So when he invited me for dinner at his place, I said yes. He was excited to show me some of his unpublished work. Honestly, I was flattered. I'd been through a bad breakup recently, and the attention felt nice. It was a Saturday night. Liam's apartment was in a quiet building just outside the city. The inside was very minimalist. Clean white walls, just enough furniture, and lots of black frames everywhere. Once I started observing the photos, a weird feeling crept into my mind. That's what made me feel a bit off. Dozens of perfectly arranged photos covered the wall, each one a deeply unsettling, private portrait. They weren't typical poses. Instead, they captured intimate moments. A woman brushing her teeth, a man gazing out a dark window, a child asleep on a couch. All were in black and white, incredibly sharp, and none of the subjects were looking at the camera. I paused at a photo of a woman undressing in her bedroom. "Wow," I commented. "Your models really know how to pose naturally." He smiled, almost proudly, and laughed when I assumed he was joking. "They're not models," he corrected. "They're real people." I then asked how he managed to capture them secretly, through windows. "It's honestly the best way," he replied, and a cold shiver ran down my spine. He poured me wine and served pasta, but my appetite was gone, and I only picked at my plate. Every so often, he'd glance over my shoulder, as if checking the light. He then began to justify his peeping Tom behavior as art. "You see," he explained, "I don't believe in posed photos. Real emotion happens when people don't know they're being watched. That's when they're most vulnerable." I asked if he'd ever been caught. Sipping his wine, he casually mentioned Jay was angry, but I apologized and made it up to her. At that moment, my gut screamed at me to leave. I thanked him for dinner and said I needed to get going. But Liam stood up quickly, blocking the front door. "Oh, wait. Before you go, I want to show you my masterpiece." My heart dropped. I smiled politely and nodded, pretending to be curious. All the while I was trying to come up with an excuse, something to get out fast. As he turned toward a hallway, I quietly slipped a fork off the table and hid it in my sleeve. He led me to a door, the end of the hall, even before he unlocked it with a key. I could smell something awful behind it. That was red flag number 200. The room was dimly lit. The smell was choking my nostrils, like something rotten had been soaked in chemicals. The moment the door creaked open, I knew I wasn't safe. There was a chair in the center of the room, and a woman was on it. At first I thought she was alive, but her skin was gray. Her limbs were swollen, her head was tilted, and she had this horrible stiff smile on her face. Her eyes were fixated on me. Her eyeballs were filled with red veins and opened too wide. When I looked closer, I noticed movement inside her mouth. For a second, I thought she was really alive. But then her mouth moved slowly. Suddenly, her jaw flung open, and clouds of maggots dripped to the floor. Tiny maggots wriggled through her hair too. She was wearing a red bathing suit, like she had been at the beach. But now she was posed like a mannequin, propped up like a trophy. I felt the fork slide from my hand and hit the floor. Liam stepped inside, eyes glowing with sick joy. "It is beautiful, right?" he whispered. "I caught her swimming alone 2 summers ago, and I watched her for weeks before I made my move. Look at that expression, fear, trust, confusion, all frozen forever." I couldn't breathe or blink. My mind struggled to accept the horrific reality before me. It wasn't an artistic illusion. The stench was undeniable. The flies buzzed, and the psychopath stood beside me, reveling in the moment with unsettling laughter. Then something even more grotesque occurred. Whether from decomposition or exposure to air, the woman's face suddenly peeled away from her skull, revealing putrid flesh and bone. I screamed and bolted for the door. As Liam's voice echoed, "Where are you going? There's no need to be scared. I can fix this. I'll glue it up. I thought you understood me." I sprinted into the street, flagging down a passing car. I screamed hysterically, and the couple inside called the police while I sat trembling in their back seat. When the police arrived, I led them back to the apartment, but Liam had vanished. The girl's body, the photographs, and my half-eaten pasta remained on the table for weeks. They searched, issued alerts, and questioned neighbors. No one knew him well. He'd only lived there a few months and paid in cash. I suspect he even gave me a false name. To this day, he hasn't been found. But one thing still haunts me. About a month later, I received an anonymous package containing a single photograph, me at a cafe with a co-worker, clearly taken from outside the window. I am a 19-year-old female who just got into college, and so far I was living a pretty normal life. I enjoy makeup and horror movies, and I often joke about them with my friends. I recently got on Tinder. It started as a joke with my roommates. They'd said I'd receive a ton of matches because I am the hot one.
I didn't think much of it because I've always been used to the attention as I walked through the hallway in my shorts. I noticed that some boys would gaze at me with smiles while some girls appeared visibly displeased. But once I went live on Tinder, I didn't expect my phone to blow up with notifications.
I mostly ignored the weird guys, and I just flirted a little to pass the time. But then I got a message from someone with the username @devoted_blood. Isn't that an intriguing name? I believed that the profile was fake. It had no pictures, just a black and white rose for the profile pic. But the first message was kind of poetic. "I saw you. You are brighter than the moon and darker than sin." I rolled my eyes, but decided to strike up a conversation just for fun. "Smooth. You write that in every girl's DMs," he replied instantly. "No, only you." What followed were long messages. "Obsessive. I had received love letters, poems, and even drawings. At first, I laughed about it with my friends. It was harmless, or so I thought, but then he started sending photos, notes written on crumpled paper, smeared in what he said was blood. One had my name written over and over again, like in some horror movie. Another said, "I'll never let anyone else have you at that point." I unmatched him. I believe the message was from an angsty teenager trying to appear edgy, but then the texts started coming through WhatsApp. Same username, same poems. One night I was lying in my room scrolling through reels, and I went home for the holidays, and my mom was away on a work trip. Suddenly, I got texts from him again. "Do you know how crazy I am for you? I love you." I was in no mood to further encourage this creepy stranger, so I sent, "I bet you aren't man enough to actually show your face, loser." It was just a petty message, meant to irritate him. Like, what could he really do? 5 minutes later, my doorbell rang. It was around 12:30 tonight.
I was home alone. My heart dropped. I went downstairs trying to be as quiet as possible and peeked into the people. I didn't see anyone outside. I gently cracked open the door. My eyes wandered over the empty porch, and then I looked down at the ground beneath me. There was a red envelope sitting on the doorstep.
I picked it up with shaking hands. It reeked of a mix of iron and something sour. Once I opened the letter, my palms got sweaty and fear. The words were written in blood, and it read, "Did you miss me?" I slammed the door shut and locked everything. My voice was breaking as I talked to the 911 dispatcher, almost on the verge of crying. She tried to calm me down and told me to stay on the line until officers arrived. I moved away from the front and turned off all the lights, hoping whoever was out there would think I wasn't home. But then I made a mistake. I went to check the backyard window, and there was indeed someone. It was a guy standing shirtless in the middle of the yard, complete. He was merely focusing his gaze on my window. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. I just watched in frozen horror. I grabbed a flashlight and flicked it on him. The beam hit his chest first, and I saw my name carved into his skin. Trails of flesh blood oozed from every single letter. Kiara. It looked like it had been done with something jagged, like a knife or glass. As I moved the flashlight to his face, he slowly lifted his head, and it wasn't some stranger. It was my best friend's stepdad, Alan, the same guy who used to drive us to school, who always stood a little too close, and who one time told me, "You look older than 19, the one who once commented on my Instagram selfie. Beautiful, just like your mother." I'd always felt something off about him, but I never imagined this. He gave me this twisted, almost childlike grin, like he was proud of what he'd done. I dropped the flashlight, screaming my lungs out. I rushed back in my room and crouched in the corner, crying like a 6-year-old. The cops arrived 5 minutes later, but he was already gone. They searched the yard and confiscated the letter and even discovered bloody footprints leading into the woods. I gave them all the details, the messages, the username, the notes, but they couldn't find anything linking a devoted blood to Alan. His number wasn't in my phone. The Tinder profile was already deleted. It was like he'd scrubbed everything. They issued a warrant, but he vanished. Surprisingly, he had quit his job and left my friend and her mom months back. My friend never talks about it. She can't even look at me in the eye. Her mom was taken in for questioning, but she claimed to know nothing. Weeks have gone by, and I still live in fear. A few nights ago, I heard a noise at my window. I swear when I looked, I saw a shadow move away. The next morning, I found a white rose on my porch. It was soaked in human blood, tied to a note that simply said, "The blood may fade, but I never will." I'm getting a restraining order against him this weekend. My mom has told the cops to keep an eye on the guy and get him into custody the moment they spot him. I really hope he gets caught, so I can have sound sleep at night.